Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Cowboys Report presented by the Guild. Once again, I'm Tom Downey. Follow me on Twitter at WhatGoingDowney. The NFL draft is rapidly approaching, so let's take a look at some potential first-round options for the Dallas Cowboys on the offensive side of the ball. We're only looking here on the guys that play offense. We'll start on the offensive line, and we look at one Will Hernandez. And there's a very common theme throughout this. It's offensive line and receivers. That's where the Dallas will look in terms of offense. When it comes to Hernandez, I think he'd be a good fit for the Cowboys. He's got great power. He's going to be a mauler in the NFL. He's kind of got that bowling ball build. Those of you that follow the Eagles' offensive line, reminds me a little bit of one Brandon Brooks. The knocks on Hernandez, not the best height, not the best athlete, but he'd be in that 19 to 50 range. I think in general here for most of these guys we look at when it comes to offense in the first round, they're not really worth the 19th overall pick, but they're not going to last to 50th for the Cowboys in the second round. But Hernandez, if the Cowboys don't have a guy like a receiver that we'll get to in a minute, if they don't have some of the defensive guys they want, I think Hernandez does make some sense. He is kind of the mauler strength guy of the two guards we'll discuss, which brings us to Isaiah Wynn, another second-team All-American. Played left tackle in college a little bit, played some guard as well. He's a little bit of a better athlete than Hernandez is. By the way, NFL.com's comparison for him is actually one Ronald Leary. So Cowboys fans can kind of get a good feel of what Wynn could bring. Not the best strength, does need to add some weight. His height is that of a guard, but the rest of his build and skill set kind of points to tackle. I don't think he's going to be able to be a tackle in the NFL, but I think he'd be a good athletic guard for a team that likes to pull and move their offensive linemen. I think Wynn makes perfect sense for the Cowboys, especially, by the way, if they trade down in the first round. I think both these guards make a little bit more sense. Let's get to the guy I think everyone would love to get on the Dallas Cowboys. That is one Calvin Ridley. He is the best receiver in this year's class, and he's not the best athlete, but he's a good enough athlete. NFL teams like to find one specific trait that they like, that they want their prospects to have, that they do well, that can make them great at the NFL. Ridley's elite trait is this. He gets open, and that's a really good trait to have as a wide receiver. He is a very Dak-friendly option. Now, his numbers aren't that great, but he also had to play with Jalen Hurts in college, so we'll kind of give him a pass on that one. The big knock for me is, A, he does have some droppages. He had 20 drops over 3 years at Alabama. We rightfully critique Dez for dropping passes. Ridley has the same type thing. He's not that great over the middle, and he turns 24 in his rookie year. That's older than you'd like to see your first-round pick be, but he gets open. He's the best receiver in this year's class. I don't think he falls to Dallas, but if he does, I think Ridley is the pick. Two more receivers that we'll look at here, and good time to mention this. In general, the difference between, let's say, the number 2 receiver and the number 12 or 13 receiver, very minimal. There's not much of a difference between guys like Courtland Sutton and some other guys we'll discuss later, but I think Sutton does go in round 1 because of his size. Checks in at 6'4", almost 220 pounds. Good enough athlete. He is a big-bodied possession receiver, had great production at SMU, but he's very raw, not great at separation, needs some work there. I think he's a little too similar to Dez Bryant. The Cowboys don't need 2 of those guys, but I think he does go in round 1. I don't think he lasts until round 2. One more guy here for you as we look through 5 first-round options. It is James Washington, a guy we've had several comments on here on the Cowboys Report. He had incredible production. He was a big play machine for Oklahoma State, but he's not quite, I think, the NFL draft prospect that he was a college player when he was arguably the best receiver in college football. He didn't have the greatest size. He checked in at just under 5'11". Good size, though, at 210 pounds, so the height weight is a little interesting there, kind of like Pierre Garçon, kind of in that mold. But he's a big play machine, but he also beat up against really bad Big 12 coverages. So my biggest concern for Washington is I don't know what his elite trait is. He's not the fastest guy, not the strongest guy, not the tallest guy, not the best at getting open, not the best route runner, but his production can't be overlooked. I think it's unfair to say, oh, well, he's not the best athlete, so he's going to be dropped. But in the end, I think Washington makes a lot of sense for the Dallas Cowboys. So I want to know from you guys, who is your ideal first-round target? Now, I'll let you answer any particular player, even though most of these guys will not be available. For example, I would love to get Roquan Smith. Roquan Smith will not fall to the Cowboys, barring some off-the-field issues. In terms of first-round targets on offense, I'd love to get Calvin Ridley. Don't think it's all that ideal, though. We'll discuss this again when we look at defensive players, and that's where mine is, but I'm not going to give that away to you guys quite yet. So here are your 5 potential first-round draft picks on the offensive side of the ball. Will Hernandez, Isaiah Wynn, Calvin Ridley, Courtland Sutton, and James Washington. Those were your first-round guys, and as I mentioned before, I do not think the Cowboys look towards the offense in the first round of the draft unless they trade down. However, I do think Dallas could look towards the second round for offensive players. So let's take a look at some of the wide receivers who could be options. You got 5 guys here again. 4 of them are wide receivers. And we start with Christian Kirk of Texas A&M. And I don't think that Kirk ends up falling to the Cowboys in the second round. I thought of the other guys outside of Calvin Ridley, so I think Sutton and Washington will go off the board first. So I think of that group of 3, I think Kirk is the most likely to fall to the second round. I don't know if he actually does, though. So Kirk had really good production at Texas A&M, also offers some great return value. He's a good route runner. He is very much a Dak-friendly type receiver. My issue with Kirk is this, though, and he reminds me a little bit of Golden Tate, which is exactly what Dallas needs. Some will think he's only a slot guy. I think he's actually more quick than fast. He's a good athlete, but I don't think he's going to run as the 40 time as well as some might think he'll do. I like Kirk a lot. Doesn't have ideal size. A lot of people might try and pencil him in as a slot guy. I think he can play outside, which, by the way, is a common theme for several of these guys we're going to go over. One of those guys is Anthony Miller of Memphis. Much like Calvin Ridley, does turn 24 in his rookie year. Doesn't have the greatest size or the greatest speed, but he's a really good route runner. He is also, by the way, for a guy that checks in under 6 foot, surprisingly good at the catch point. He goes up and wins jump balls. Not something you often see for a player of Miller's size. He reminds me, by the way, of an Emmanuel Sanders, Sterling Shepard type. I think he's that type of guy. Some will say, oh, he's a slot guy. I think Miller can play on the outside. His production, by the way, at Memphis was incredible. Let's get to Maryland's DJ Moore, and I think Moore would be my ideal second-round selection if he's on the board. Kind of similar to one Anthony Miller, except he's younger. I think Moore and Miller can do a lot of the same things as prospects, but he's younger than Anthony Miller. He's actually one of the youngest receivers in this year's class. And I think, as we've seen with guys like Tyron Smith, that does matter for NFL teams. He gets open. He's great after the catch. He has a little bit of Stephon Diggs in him, also a Maryland grad, but he's not quite as fast as Diggs is. One more receiver, and this is producer Brett Scott's favorite guy, Michael Gallup, the Colorado State wide receiver. Incredible production at Colorado State. He's always had the talent, and you see the poor SAT scores on there. He committed to South Carolina, didn't get in because of academics, had to go the JUCO route, got hurt his final year at JUCO, ended up at Colorado State, and put up great numbers. He is a very well-rounded prospect. Good size, checks in at just over 6'1", good speed, good separation. Maybe not the best at all those all those areas, and he is a bit raw throughout his game, but I think Gallup is a strong second-round option, and I think one of those receivers we just mentioned, Gallup, Moore, Miller, and maybe Christian Kirk, is on the board for the Cowboys in round 2. I think all of those guys would be strong number 2 wide receivers. This year's class is full of number 2 guys, but not very many number 1 wide receivers. And then one more offensive lineman here for you. This is Billy Price, who can play left guard, right guard, center, can probably play tackle in a pinch as well. He is a little too aggressive at times, and he's not quite as athletic as Isaiah Wynn, not quite as strong as Will Hernandez, but Price, a very well-rounded lineman. He is the classic potential 10-year starter up front. But back to those wide receivers, a quick reaction poll for you guys. Which potential second-round receiver would you want the most? Give us a heart for Christian Kirk, a like for Michael Gallup, a laughing face for Anthony Miller, or a wow face for DJ Moore. I'll be honest, I'll take any of these guys, and I think one of them ends up falling to Dallas in round 2, and if the Cowboys can get one of those guys, plug him in across from Dez Bryant as the number 2 receiver, I think that really helps the Cowboys going forward. I think DJ Moore, Kirk, and Miller in particular are the perfect fits for what Dak Prescott wants to do as a quarterback. Here were those 5 guys, if you missed them, in terms of second-round offensive potential draft picks. Christian Kirk, Anthony Miller, DJ Moore, Michael Gallup, and Billy Price.